I would like to introduce you to Sabado. He was my pet fish growing up, but really he was my first child. I loved Sabado more than anything. I adopted him when I was about 7 years old, and during my first few weeks with Sabado, everything went smoothly. That was until I noticed something. It was green and slimy and growing on the corners of the glass walls of Sabado's aquarium. At first, I didn't pay too much attention to it, but over the coming days, it continued to spread. I did not know what was going on. Had I done something wrong? As it spread further and further, I really began to worry. Was my inexperience as a fish parent gonna get Sabado killed? Relax, my parents told me. Your fears are unfounded. Sabado will be just fine. The substance growing all over the aquarium was, as some of you might have guessed, algae. I'd heard the word before, but I wasn't exactly sure if it was harmful or not. After a little bit of research, I learned that while algae wasn't very pretty to look at, it wasn't harmful to Sabado. In fact, algae can actually help improve fish health. It provided Sabado with another food source, and through photosynthesis, it increases oxygen availability within the tank. I was very relieved and happy to know that while Sabado's little glass world was still safe, and it remained a safe and healthy environment for him until, sadly, he passed away. Rest in peace, Sabado. As I've grown older, my concerns about healthy living environments have shifted from fish tanks to the world at large. Just like Sabado's fish tank, the Earth is really a closed system, with limitations as real as the glass walls of his aquarium. There are only so many resources available, and a limitation on how much waste can be accumulated without causing problems. And this is why, looking after a fish, you need to constantly care for them. Cleaning the fish tank, adding food, and in my case, occasionally cleaning off some algae so that I could watch Sabado swim. But who is going to be taking care of Earth's system? As Earth's population increases to approximately 10 billion people in 2050, it's coming with challenges that are only becoming increasingly pressing. News headlines are filled with words such as climate change, air pollution, plastic, fossil fuels, and hunger. The global challenges that we face as a species are significant and will only become more severe as the number of people on Earth increases. So, what on earth are we going to do? If you're anything like me, thinking about all this can be overwhelming and sometimes downright depressing. And really, it feels like we'll have to discover and devise some intricate, new, overcomplicated solution to even stand a chance at conquering these world problems. But what if I told you that this green goop that grew on Sabado's walls could play a big part in solving the world problems? Well, hopefully you would say, tell me more, because that is exactly what I plan on doing this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to talk to you tonight about the wonderful world of algae and how this slimy green goo just might hold the solutions to many of our environmental problems. But before I get into that, what exactly is algae? Well, it is a group of simple, photosynthetic, non-flowering organisms. They provide the energy base of the aquatic food system, producing sugar and oxygen. And kelp and seaweed are very well-known examples of algae. Algae is, yes, a very simple organism, but it might just hold the key to many of our problems. For one thing, Earth's drastic population increase is going to lead to more demand for food. Traditional farming methods are not going to be able to meet this demand for two reasons. Firstly, due to soil loss. We're losing 24 billion tons of soil annually. And soil regeneration is a lengthy process. It takes 1,000 years to generate 5 centimeters of arable soil. And secondly, the irrigational system involved in agricultural production is incredibly inefficient. We waste about half of the water. And agricultural irrigation accounts for 70% of water usage worldwide. And with this increase in agriculture working to feed this ever-growing population, it's placing an even greater demand on our freshwater supplies. And this depletion of natural freshwater resources has been experienced to an even greater extent in LEDCs. For example, in Cape Town, where the government has placed restrictions on the daily amount of water that individuals are allowed to use. And developed countries aren't immune either. As many of you probably know from public notices around Barcelona, Catalonia is currently experiencing a significant drought. Just this past February, Catalonia declared a drought emergency as our reservoirs fell to under 16%. Not only are we seeing an increase in population, but there's also an increase of living standards as more people move into the middle class. And this is a good thing, of course, but as more people move into the middle class, they tend to want to eat more meat. And meat production is even more water dependent than agricultural irrigation. It's estimated that it takes 1,847 gallons of water for 1 pound of meat. That's 39 bathtubs filled to the brink with water for a single pound. And it's not because our cows and chickens are drinking so much water. It's because the grains that are grown to feed and fatten up these species use an extravagant amount. And what's more, the type of corn that's used to feed these animals depletes the soil of its minerals. Simply put, almost all of our current food production system is unsustainable. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where algae comes in. Algae offers the opportunity to be the bedrock of our future food production system. Now, wait a minute, before you worry that I'm here to tell you all to switch to an algae-only diet, I'm not suggesting that we have to give up our chicken and bacon. I mean, it would probably be a good idea for your health, but it's not my point here. You see, in comparison to corn, algae has the ability to produce 167 times more useful biomass on the same amount of land. So, as an alternative to corn-fed cattle, we could be raising our cows on red algae instead. Algae is grown in marine environments, usually algae farms, which don't require any fresh water, which we know is in low supply. It also means they don't require arable land, and doesn't deplete the soil of minerals and nutrients the same way as grain production does. And algae can even be grown vertically to further decrease land usage. And this has additional benefits. A study conducted by the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency showed that feeding red algae to cattle can improve the cow's health as well as reduce methane emissions by up to 90%. And I'm sure most of you have heard that these pesky cow farts are not helping our global warming issues. And not only will feeding algae to livestock help preserve water supplies, reduce soil depletion, and lower greenhouse gases, it can also serve as a nutritious, bountiful, standalone food source for humans. Eating algae, some of you may say yuck, that you don't want to be eating any slimy green goo. And okay, I admit, maybe I am trying to convince you a little bit to be eating some algae, but just hear me out first. I wanted to ask, how many of you here tonight are sushi lovers? If you could raise your hands. Well, if you're raising hands, you're already eating algae. And that is a great thing, because algae is abundant in omega-3 and 6 fatty acids, numerous vitamins and essential minerals. And with 145 million children under the age of 5 suffering from malnutrition worldwide, algae could be a game changer. A specific species of algae, spirulina, would be an excellent choice to combat these issues. The most efficient elements in child malnutrition are iron and vitamin A. Spirulina has an abundance of both. To put it in perspective, spirulina has 18% more iron than is found in beef, and has the equivalent levels of vitamin A as is found in salmon. Now, in very young children, consuming just 1 gram of spirulina a day, the child can recover from malnutrition in just a few weeks. It is an incredible protein source that allows for the recovery of body weight and muscle proteins. Spirulina's growth conditions and tendencies make it an ideal plant to be grown, especially in LADCs. Its biomass is able to double every 2 to 5 days. This allows for frequent harvesting. And it can also be turned into a powder, which makes it easier to distribute to areas in need. And it lasts for 2 to 3 years, which is ideal when considering that transport to isolated or war-torn regions might be lengthy and have to occur less frequently. In short, algae could go a long way in solving our food and nutritional challenges. But that's not all algae could do for us. I've got one word for you, Ben. Plastics. This is a famous line from the 1967 movie, The Graduate, in which an executive tries to recruit a recent college graduate to join his firm. Plastics are the future, he told him. And he was right. In today's world, plastics are used in nearly every phase of modern life. Just think about it. How many times today have you used something made of plastic? Probably more than you can count. And you're most likely using things that you're not even aware contain plastic. Plastic is in all of our packaging, in bottles and bags and containers. It's also what makes our toys, our phones, our clothes, our furniture, and so much more. And when I say much more, I mean it's found in our air, in our water, and our food. I mean, if you thought eating algae was gross, you've been eating plastic this entire time. There are 380 million tons of plastic produced every year, and about half of that is made for single use. That means that 190 million tons of plastic are used once, maybe only for a few seconds before being thrown away. And then what? Then it ends up in the ocean, where fish, seabirds, mammals can become entangled with it. This can lead to starvation and leave them vulnerable to predators. Sea mammals like whales and dolphins can become entangled in it underwater, eventually causing them to drown. When we continue to produce plastic by the hundreds of millions of tons every year, but it takes these same plastics hundreds of years to break down. And when they do begin to break down, they turn into microplastics. And this is how they end up in our food and our water and our air. Microplastics can be consumed by marine animals across all levels of the trophic food chain. And they inhibit growth, they reduce the animal's food intake, they harm reproductive systems, as well as cause genetic damage. Microplastics enter our system through contaminated food and water. And it's been estimated that the average person consumes 2.5 kilos of plastic a year. That means that in this past year, you've eaten the equivalent of 50 plastic bags. And scientists suspect that this plastic consumption could be damaging our bodies, causing organ dysfunction, structural and functional damage to the nervous system, as well as damaging the reproductive system. It may in fact be behind the increased infertility rates, as plastics are said to reduce sperm production. And if you do conceive a child, it comes with plastic already in it, as microplastics have been found in the placentas of unborn babies. If all this isn't bad enough for you, plastics are also part of the global warming issue, since more than 99% of plastics are made from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels go through a process called polymerization, where they're turned into polymers, which are the foundation of plastics. However, fossil fuels aren't the only source for polymers. They could also be found in sustainable sources such as algae. We can produce eco-friendly plastics from spirulina algae. Scientists have been able to create these biodegradable plastics from this blue-green algae that are already being used in our cosmetics and food. And spirulina is a great choice, as it is carbon neutral and is able to be cultivated on such a large scale. Switching to bioplastics would allow us to stop using fossil fuels in all of our plastic packaging and avoid all of this plastic pollution. And beyond this, spirulina is an incredible source of polymer. It's renewable, it's biodegradable, can be decomposed by microorganisms on both land and water. And it actually makes packaging more water resistant. But get this, of all its mind-blowing characteristics is that it's edible. I mean, if you're going to be eating plastic anyway, it might as well be algae-based. We could be eating that food inside the package for dinner and then have the package itself as a dessert. It sounds crazy. But in fact, this is already being done. At a typical marathon race, thousands of plastic cups and bottles used to hydrate the runners are left all over the streets after the race. And they end up in mounds of plastics that will take hundreds of years to break down. To avoid this, the London Marathon tried something. They handed out water to runners in algae-based plastic capsules. This helped them avoid the mounds of plastic waste after the race. And even if runners chose not to eat these odorless and tasteless pods, leaving on the ground was much less harmful, as they were able to decay in such a short amount of time. Once again, algae saved the day. Now, imagine the benefits of including these bio-friendly plastics in all areas of life. You could be using packaging as compost for your garden, and if they do end up in the landfill, they'll be able to biodegrade in such a short amount of time. No plastic, no problem. Now, trust me, I could stand up here and talk to you all about the wonders of algae for hours, but I think at some point I would be dragged off the stage. So I assure you, there are countless more incredible applications of algae. So if you're still not convinced, I encourage you to look into algae-based biofuel, how it can be used to create pharmaceuticals, or even just its power of carbon sequestration. So with all these incredible solutions algae provides, why are we not already seeing it play a bigger role in our society? Is it because people think about algae and they still think about this green slimy goo on the inside of fish tanks? Well, not exactly. We haven't seen a significant switch to algae due to lack of legislation outlawing unsustainable practices. And there simply aren't enough governmental programs subsidizing the development of algae-based alternatives. It's simply easy for us to continue with our unsustainable, harmful, but profitable practices than really making an effort to switch and engage in more sustainable practices. After all, it's politicians who make these laws, but it's corporations who get these politicians elected. For example, grain and sugar-based products, most of which are corn-based, are highly subsidized, especially in the United States. And these companies have powerful lobbyists within Washington, D.C., who are pushing this industry's agenda. A U.S. annual report states that the government gave subsidies of $9.5 billion to farms producing corn. These subsidies provide an incentive to continue this unsustainable method of agriculture rather than making the change to algae. In order to give algae a fair chance, we have to stop subsidizing competing crops. All these benefits can solve so many global issues and change our daily lives in so many ways, all found in this simple green and slimy organism that I one day found growing on the inside of Salvador's aquarium. Instead of searching the universe for the biggest, most complex issue to all of our problems, I hope that we'll be able to invest in the simplicity that's been right in front of us all along. Algae. Thank you.